Okay, so you know how it is, like, we're always, like, messing around with words in English, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, cutting them down, squashing them together,
Yeah.
just kinda making them, I guess, punchier. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah.
But we're gonna deep dive into that today, the whole, like, why we shorten words, how we do it, and what's, like, the cool way versus, well, the way that just makes people roll their eyes.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
And we've got a really cool episode of English with Confidence as our source material for this deep dive. They get into all the nitty-gritty.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it might seem like we're just being lazy with language, but I think there's something kind of, like, clever about it too, you know?
Oh, absolutely. It's like there's a method to the madness. And for anyone listening, I think getting like understanding these patterns, it doesn't just help you sound more natural, but it also like gives you a glimpse into how our communication like needs, right? And even social trends shape the words we use.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to get into today.
That's our mission. Okay, so the English with Confidence episode, they start by, like, laying out the three main ways we shrink our words.
Hmm.
First up, clipping.
Right.
It's like we're taking a shortcut. Chop off the beginning, chop off the end. Boom, shorter word.
Exactly.
We do it all the time.
Right. Yeah.
Advertisement becomes ad. Telephone is just phone. But here's what I thought was interesting. They even pointed out that new words, like fairly new words, like influencer,
Right.
are already getting clipped to just fluencer.
Yep.
What do you think about that? That, like, fast-forward adaptation.
Well, I think what's really fascinating about clipping is how it reflects how ordinary a word has become, right? The
Mhm.
beginning or the end, the bit that gets lopped off, is often the more formal or less important part for understanding it quickly. So with fluencer, you see that core meaning influence
Yeah.
staying put, right? And it suggests that the in prefix is becoming less necessary to get that meaning across. Especially, I think, online where everything's, gotta be fast, fast,
Oh,
fast.
yeah, for sure.
So it's a sign, I think, of that word really like settling into everyday digital language.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, next up, we've got blends. This is where we go a little more creative. We're like word chefs, matching two words together
Love it.
to make a brand new one that kind of, like, combines their meanings. Breakfast, lunch, you get brunch, smoke, fog. Unfortunately, you get smog.
Right.
And then for the digital age, you've got, of course, webinar, web plus seminar. When you see these blends popping up, like, what does that tell you about what's happening in our lives or in our language?
I think blends often signal like new concepts emerging
Right.
or hybrid activities.
Yeah.
So brunch, like you said, perfectly nails that in-between meal, right? Webinar
Mhm.
that shows how we've fused online technology with those traditional seminar formats.
Right.
It's like a really, I think, efficient way to name something totally new
Yeah.
without having to come up with a whole new word out of thin air. It shows that like our language is actively trying to categorize and name new experiences by, pulling from that vocabulary that we already have.
I like that. We're resourceful.
Exactly.
Okay, and then, of course, we have our acronyms and initialisms,
Yeah.
like the OG word shorteners, right?
Yeah.
You take the first letters of a phrase, make it a snappy little abbreviation. You've got your
Mhm.
classics like ASAP, right? As soon as possible. And more recently, like FOMO, fear of missing out.
Hmm.
Or even, I mean, I got to mention it, the maybe infamous YOLO, you only live once.
Oh, yeah.
It's like we're creating this, like, secret handshake with language, right?
It really is. I think acronyms and initialisms, they often pop up because we need them, right?
Yeah.
Long phrases or things we say all the time, they just become a little bit easier to handle this way.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting is how some of them, like FOMO, it's almost like they take on a life of their own.
Yeah.
They become part of our everyday vocabulary, even if we don't stop to think about what those letters stand for each time.
That's true.
They become like new units of meaning.
Okay, so we've looked at the how of shortening, but for anyone listening, I think the real, like, skill is knowing when it's going to make you sound cool and natural and when it might get you that, the cringe look.
Right.
English with Confidence, they had this fun cool versus cringe breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
So on the cool side, we've got, like, info for information,
Yeah.
intro for introduction,
Yeah.
app for application. Pretty standard, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and this one I thought was funny. Cuke for cucumber.
I like that one.
Made the cool list, along with legit for legitimate.
Yeah.
What is it about those? Like, why do those just feel right? you know?
Well, I think the cool shortenings, they've kind of reached that level of like everyone uses them and they just sound good. They roll off the tongue. They've been around long enough to really like blend into the language.
Yeah.
If you think about info, it's shorter, it's snappier, but it doesn't lose any of that like key meaning.
Right.
Cube might be a bit newer, more casual, but it's got that playfulness that keeps it from like sounding forced.
Yeah.
I think it's about finding that sweet spot between efficiency and like how well it fits in the language.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, now we got to talk about the flip side. The cringe shortenings.
Oh boy.
These are the ones the episode was like, maybe just avoid these unless you're going for like irony or something. We're talking about totes for totally obviously, and presh for precious.
Ooh, yeah.
What is it about those? Like, why do they land so differently?
I think that cringe factor often comes from shortenings that are like overly cutesy or sound like fake, or like someone's like desperately trying to use a trend that's either not really caught on or is already, over.
Yeah.
They feel less about like communicating clearly and more about trying to project a certain image with your language.
Oh, that's interesting.
So for you listening, it's about understanding those nuances, right? And thinking about like who you're talking to and what the situation is.
Yeah, totally. And it's wild how those preferences can even change based on where you are, right?
Oh, for sure.
Like the episode pointed out, US, it's math, UK, it's maths.
Right.
Same subject, slightly different clip. And while both of us say fridge for refrigerator, apparently the UK was the originator of that particular shortcut. It just shows you how language evolves differently in different places, doesn't it?
It really does. I think those regional variations, they show us that language isn't this like one-size-fits-all thing. Even within the same language, different communities develop their own norms, their own shortcuts.
Yeah.
That S in maths, the adoption of fridge, those are like little markers of cultural identity and linguistic history.
Yeah.
It reminds us that what sounds natural to one group, well, it might sound a little different to another.
That's a good point. Okay, so folks out there, when should you just absolutely not shorten words unless you're going for a specific, maybe like a humorous effect? The English with Confidence episode, they had some good guidelines. Formal settings, that's a big one, right? If you're emailing your boss,
Right.
you probably want to say, I'll send the documentation, not, I'll send the docs.
For sure.
And in an academic paper, you're going to say the experiment, not the expo.
Yeah.
Why is that so important, maintaining that formality in those situations?
Well, in those formal settings, I think using the full words shows professionalism, attention to detail, respect for those kind of established ways of communicating.
Mhm.
It makes things super clear and avoids any confusion that could come up from those more casual shortenings.
Yeah.
So for you listening, remembering this distinction can really make a difference in how your message comes across.
Oh, totally. Okay, and here's another thing to watch out for. They call it overshortening. Taking a word that's already pretty short and trying to, I don't know, squeeze it down even further. They gave the examples of, CAS for casual, which just sounds,
Yeah.
I don't know,
A little much.
yeah, a little strained. And then DAW for adorable, which I feel like is more for cute animal videos online. What's the risk of pushing the boundaries of shortening that far?
Well, overshortening can end up sounding unnatural, or even a bit like you're trying too hard.
Yeah.
It can kind of mess with the flow of conversation and make it harder for people to get what you mean. With DAW, it's become pretty tied to online expressions,
Right.
like
Yeah.
showing you think something's cute. Using it in everyday conversation, it's probably going to sound weird.
Yeah.
I think the key for you is to pay attention to how native speakers actually shorten words in different situations.
Right.
And don't try to force abbreviations that people aren't really using.
Don't be that guy.
Exactly.
Okay. And then there are the ambiguous short forms, right?
Mm.
Where the shortened version could mean a couple of different things depending on what's going on. So they gave examples like sus could be suspicious or suspect, and cap could be lie or, a hat. In those cases, I feel like just being clear should always be the priority, right?
I think so, yeah. I mean, the main goal of talking to someone is for them to understand you.
Yeah.
And if you use a shortened word that could mean a couple of things, then using the full word, we're just playing it safe.
Yeah.
I mean, the situation might make it clear what you mean, but you don't want to rely on that, especially if you're trying to get across something important.
Yeah.
So for you, always think about, could this cause confusion?
Yeah. Good advice. Okay, so how do you actually make it sound natural when you do shorten words?
Right.
English with Confidence had some great advice. First, mirror your audience.
Mm.
If you're hanging out with friends who are saying vibes all the time,
Mm-hmm.
you might naturally start doing it too, right?
Uh-huh.
But maybe you wouldn't in like a work meeting, right?
Probably not.
So why is that mirroring so important?
Well, mirroring how other people talk, it's a big part of social interaction. It helps us connect with people, feel like we belong, and it makes sure that what we're saying like resonates with them.
Yeah.
By paying attention and adjusting to the language people around you are using, including, those shortenings,
Right.
you can communicate more effectively and really build that connection.
It's like you're speaking their language.
Exactly.
Literally. Okay, another tip. Start with the common ones. Words like, photo for photographs or gym for gymnasium. They're so ingrained you can pretty much use them anywhere without even thinking about it.
Right. Those are the tried and true shortenings, the ones that have just become like part of the language, right?
Yeah.
Everyone knows what they mean and they don't sound out of place or unprofessional in most casual settings.
Right.
So starting with those is it's a safe bet.
Yeah, you're not going to go wrong. And here's one that I think is more about, like, spoken English.
Mm-hmm.
When in doubt, just say it fast.
Yeah.
Like, the classic example is going to becoming gonna.
Right. Yep.
It's not something you'd write,
Yeah.
but it does that same, like, shortening thing in conversation.
That's so true. It's a really good point about like spoken versus written language, right? When we're just chatting casually, we tend to like shorten sounds, drop syllables just to make things quicker and easier to say.
Right, totally.
And those phonetic shortenings, that's part of what makes conversation flow smoothly.
Oh, for sure.
So for you, like noticing how native speakers do that when they talk, that can help your own spoken English sound more natural and fluid.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
They also had a couple of pro tips in the episode. One was even native speakers. We can overdo it sometimes.
Oh, yeah. We're definitely guilty of that.
Remember amazeballs? That was the thing for a while, thankfully.
Oh,
A
God.
brief thing.
Thankfully, yes.
It was just like too much,
too much enthusiasm.
way too much.
Yeah.
It's a good example of like not every attempt at shortening or blending sticks around.
Yeah.
And even the ones that do, they can fade out pretty quickly.
They can get old fast.
Yeah.
Language trends, they're always changing. What sounds cool one day might sound totally outdated or even, silly the next.
That's true.
So I think for you, it's a good reminder that moderation is key.
Don't go overboard.
Yeah.
And the other pro tip was listen first.
Yes.
Because some shortenings are like super niche. They mentioned sitch for situation, which I don't hear that one very often.
I don't either.
What about you?
No, that one's not in my regular vocabulary.
So that's great advice. Before you start throwing around a shortening you just heard, pay attention to who's using it and where.
For sure.
Some shortenings, they belong to like specific age groups or online communities or even certain professions.
Right.
You use it outside of those circles, you might sound,
A little lost?
a little lost. They even shared a listener story, and I thought this was amazing. Someone used biopic,
Okay.
BioPlus pic for biographical picture,
Right, yeah.
but they pronounced it biop.
Oh, no.
And their friends like totally teased them about it.
Oh, that's funny.
It just goes to show you, knowing the shortening isn't enough, you got to know how to say it too.
That's so true. I mean, that's a perfect example of how, like, both understanding the shortening and knowing how to say it right, they're both important.
Yeah,
A mispronounced shortening, it can actually draw more attention than if you just use the full word.
that's so true.
So for you, it really highlights how important it is to listen carefully to how native speakers actually say these shortened forms.
Yeah. I loved the listener hack they suggested. Create a shortening cheat sheet, and you color code it. Green for safe, yellow for casual only, and red for never. That's actually like a brilliant way to get a grip on this if you're really trying to improve.
It's so smart, right? It lets you like consciously group those shortenings based on, where it's okay to use them.
Yeah,
It takes what feels like, just a gut feeling and makes it more systematic.
totally. Okay, and then we've got the listener challenge. They called it the word chopper, which I love.
Fun.
They suggested first, try to spot a clipped word out in the wild, like zine for magazine.
Yeah.
They also challenged us to come up with like a believable blend, like workation for work plus vacation.
Oh, yeah.
Which, I mean, that one's definitely made it into common use.
It has.
And then the big one, the bold move. Try saying absolutely plus positively
Oh, I like that.
and see if anyone notices.
It's a good one.
Right? They even shared a little story about hearing crispy shortened to crisp, and now finding themselves saying, "That's so crisp."
Cute.
It's funny how these things, like, stick with you.
I love that. I think those challenges are like a fun way to play around with, the whole word shortening thing.
Yeah.
Noticing those clipped words makes you more aware of them. Trying to invent a blend, well, that gets your creative juices flowing.
Yeah.
And testing out those less common forms helps
Yeah.
you see how people react and understand like where the line is between a cool shortening and one that's just,
Too much.
too much.
Yeah.
So, to wrap it all up for you listening, English is, as the episode put it, lazy, ingenious ways.
I love that.
Right. We have this way of like shortening words.
Yeah.
And when you do it well, it really can make you sound more natural and it can help you connect better with others.
Absolutely. The key takeaway for you is to just be aware of the language you're hearing around you.
Yeah.
Who's using what shortenings? In what situations? Context is key.
So true. So next time someone sends you a wall of text and ends it with TLDR, you can confidently reply, Thrillix for the sum.
Perfect.
Right. So for our next deep dive, we're going to tackle one of those like head scratchers in English, the craziness of our plurals.
Yeah.
Why does mouse become mice, but house just gets an S?
Right. It makes no sense.
It's a mystery.
Mm.
Finally, something for you to think about. Think about those, like, subtle power dynamics and, those social cues that are kind of baked into our choices about whether we shorten words or not.
Uh-huh.
What does it tell us, the fact that certain digital abbreviations are on the rise, or that we still use more formal language in certain situations?
Right.
What does that say about how our communication needs are evolving and, even our underlying cultural values?
That's a good question.
A lot to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Thanks for having me.
See ya.
See ya.